All right. Thanks everyone for coming today. I'm Garrett Bullock. I am a PhD student at the University of Oxford. And we have Professor Alan Silman, who's an epidemiologist and rheumatologist. He was the director of the UK's Arthritis Research Epidemiology Unit, University of Manchester. And he's published over 500 articles. Following his stint at Manchester, he became Arthritis Research UK's first medical director, post he held from 2007 to 2014. He is currently a professor of musculoskeletal health at University of Oxford, and his current research interests are mainly in fields of comorbidities and the relation to healthcare and healthcare outcomes. We also have Dr. Nirmala Perera, postdoctoral fellow based at the University of Oxford. Dr. Perera is a member of the Sport Without Injury program at SWIPE at Linköping University in Sweden, and is the adjunct research faculty at La Trobe University in Australia. Her research focuses on injury surveillance and optimizing and implementing injury prevention programs. So I'm going to hand it off to Professor Silman, and we'll go from there.
Oh, well, hi everybody, and it's great to be participating in this webinar. And I want to talk about two things, and the first thing is what puts you in a good position to be taken on in an appropriate research unit. But the second thing, which is the flip side of the same coin, is what should you look for in a suitable research home. Now, maybe the first thing I'm going to say might surprise you. In general, research leaders struggle often to attract the right kind of people. And often, you know, when you are applying or considering going for your first research job, you approach it from a kind of point of diffidence and being defensive, asking whether somebody might be interested in hosting you. The reality is often the converse, that people such as myself welcome being approached by people who are enthusiastic and committed. So I guess my first message is, do not be diffident, do not be defensive about approaching an individual or group where you want to work. So what is it that I have looked for? What is it that I look for? And I would say I look for a number of things. I think the first thing is what I'm going to describe as hunger. To be successful in research, you have to have an appetite for getting to reach an answer, and reach an answer for questions that really excite you. And I think where somebody comes along and you feel, my goodness me, this is somebody who is really excited and is really driven and is not going to stop, and is going to push me, and is going to push my colleagues, and is going to push the boundaries of what we can achieve to get to the answer. That for a potential research supervisor, that for a potential research employer is wonderful. Where somebody comes along and says, well, you know, what can you offer me? I'm interested, I'm happy to do the work. That's not sufficient. It's that the fact that there's an excitement, there's a spark. The second thing that we look for is the fact that when you approach somebody, you've done your homework. It's all very well to say you're excited and interested and what have you, but it becomes rapidly apparent if actually you don't really know either anything about the field or anything about what that department, that potential supervisor has done. And you know, we're all human and we all love to be flattered. And you know, for somebody to come along and say, do you know what, Professor Silman, I read your last paper and I was wowed by it. You know, okay, it sounds a bit cheesy, and maybe I just need constant reassurance I'm doing the right thing. But seriously, to know that actually somebody is already committed and interested in what you're doing. I think the third thing that I look for is evidence that you have taken every opportunity available to you during your career to date, whether either as an undergraduate or postgraduate or in any occupational role in any employment that you've had, to show that you're interested in pursuing a research career. Now, clearly, if that has shown itself in completing a piece of research, in getting a publication, in presenting a poster, that's fine. But beyond that, it's, have you taken the opportunities that are available to you? And in a competitive world, it's quite easy for me or someone like me, when presented with a series of individuals, to get a sense of who really has been committed. An opportunity has arisen. Maybe it's just to do some data collection, or it's to do an audit, or to a quality improvement piece of work, or to go on a course where you weren't, this was not a requirement. But you're essentially listing that, yes, I am keen on research. And not only I'm keen on research, I'm keener on research than the next person. And this is the evidence. I have to prove it. So those are my three key messages in what you need to do and what you need to have. The flip side is, well, what should you look for? I think that particularly if you become accepted and taken on a research training program, maybe a 3 or 4 year doctoral training program, you are committing a considerable and key part of your career to that. And I have to say that there is considerable variation in the quality of what you will receive from your potential supervisor and potential supervisory department. It is so important that you go somewhere which is nurturing, where by conversations with others who've been there, that this is not an environment that you will go in and you are essentially going to sink or swim on your own. It is a group where the supervisor and those around the supervisor, those around the head of the department, take their responsibility seriously. Because to end up in a place where you're not going to get that nurturing and you put the effort in and get no support and no feedback, and that is tragic and not really going to do your long-term career any good. I think also you want to go somewhere where there is a vibrancy, where there is a real atmosphere of wanting to be successful amongst other like-minded individuals. To go to a department where you are the lone researcher, however useful that piece of research is, it's never as rewarding, it's never as fulfilling as being in a department, being in a group where there is a large number of other people maybe doing similar areas of research, maybe not, because quite often to succeed in research, there are generic skills, there are issues that transcend different fields. So there don't necessarily have to be people working on your topic, but having a group of people who are at a similar stage in a research map using similar methodology that you can relate to in the tea room and in the coffee room, in the lunch room, is vitally important. A research group where there are regular meetings, where once a week you will have the opportunity to present your progress to your peers, where you will have the opportunity to learn about progress from others who are working, is so critical, because the danger is that if you end up essentially working on your own, working in isolation, not having the supervision, then you might be working on the most exciting project, but you will have failed to have gained what you can gain. So taking that as, in a sense, the two key things, what you need to offer and what you need to look for, I would argue that at an early stage in your research career, it's also very important to understand where the action is in your field. It may not be possible for you to take a role in the University of X for a whole variety of reasons. It may not be geographically, economically possible. It may not be there any posts available. So you're doing some work in a department, which is fine, but long term you think, actually where I really would like to end up is in X. So following along what I said at the beginning, it doesn't do any harm at all. And right at the beginning of a research career, it could even be a master's project, you're actually got a project going, got supervision in a department you're happy with, but you then contact the people, and they can be in your own country, they can be overseas, they can be within another department within the same institution, and say, hi, I've started doing this in my department. You probably know my supervisor, you probably know the department, but I'm really fascinated by what you're doing. Can I write to you about it? Can I email you if I'm going to a meeting? Can I meet and talk to you about it? And again, do not be put off. People in departments who are active in fields like to receive that kind of request from people early in their career. It's if you like, it's a validation of one's international reputation. But more than that, it's a representation that actually you can help people both in your own institution and in other institutions. And who knows, that kind of contact may lead to further opportunities. And one corollary of that is if you end up going to a national or international meeting where the name is there, don't hesitate at all, maybe if you're presenting a postdoc, even if not, asking to meet with them, explain what you're doing, ask to sit down and talk to them. Yes, you may get sent away, but most people won't. And actually, if you do get sent away, it's maybe telling you something about that person. But it's allowing you to build up and create a network. It might be a network your current supervisor has already, but it may be a network that you need to build up yourself. And another thought, and just to say that many funding bodies, both within the funds available for research project, but also many funding bodies, often local, will give you the funds to have short-term attachments. Could be visit of 3 or 4 days, a week, a month, or what have you, either before you start your attachment or fairly early on, where you write to somebody and say, look, I'm doing this in this department. Can I come and talk to you? And this is exactly what I did when I started in my research a number of decades ago. But I decided, I was in the UK, there were people in the United States that I wanted to see. And I wrote a list of departments I wanted to visit. Some of them were known to my head of department, others weren't. And I emailed them and I said, I'm this little insignificant figure from London. Can I come and see you? And I got some funding for a travel grant, and for 2 months, I traveled around the US, meeting a number of people in departments. I was welcomed everywhere, and I can tell you some of those meetings led to continuing collaborations, which I have today. So I can't recommend those high enough. So maybe, Garrett, perhaps I should stop there, as my 10 minutes is up, and obviously take questions either now or later.
We're going to take questions at the end after Nim talks.
Okay,
so
thank you.
I'll go to the Nim now.
So thank you.
Alrighty, thank you. It's always very nice to listen to you, Alan, and thanks everybody for joining in as well. Greetings from Australia. It's 4:15 in the morning, so it is not really a lunch and learn for me. It's more like a breakfast thing. So I just have a few things that I think reiterate what Alan says as well along the same lines. As Garrett mentioned, I'm a postdoc. I did my PhD in Australia at Federation University. That's in Victoria, where Melbourne, close to Melbourne. And then I did worked as the research officer for Australasian College of Sports and Exercise Physicians. And I did a 1-year postdoc in Sweden, where I'm still part of the research group. And last year, I started a postdoc at Oxford, where I continue to work. So I'm just on finishing off my annual leave, just home visiting family. And the reason I kind of mention everything that I've been doing is because I think it's important and to, as Alan said, like take every opportunity, gain a range of experience, and it's the breadth and the depth of experience that kind of everything add up. And also it's really important that you follow your passion. And I am very passionate about sports injury prevention because growing up, I played a lot of sports. I have 3 brothers. We all played sport. We all got injured. And I, still have some issues because of those injuries that I had as a youth player. And I'm really passionate about preventing sports injuries because I think if you can prevent sports injuries, then we can prevent a lot of, get people to continue to participate in physical activity, continue them to play sports. Also, we can prevent things like post-traumatic osteoarthritis. So a lot of the work that I do is in primary prevention of sports injuries, but I'm also working in osteoarthritis, so kind of secondary prevention of those injuries and helping progression. So it is really important when you think about your PhD project, your master projects, or your postdoc, just finding projects or finding an area that you work in that really resonate with you, that what you're passionate with. Working in academia or in research is really, really exciting because it is lifelong learning. You get to meet lots of interesting people, or you get to travel quite a lot, but it can also be very challenging. You might be up, in the middle of the night finishing off a grant paper or, trying to meet a deadline. So you really need that to work in an area that really fuel your passion. So you don't really feel like it's work, you enjoy what you're doing. And also I think it's really important to maintain work-life balance because you need to look after your health and well-being so you can bring, your A game to your research work journey. And another thing, as Alan mentioned, networking, it's really important. Network, collaborate, being collegial, approach those high-level researchers. Don't be afraid to ask questions. You'll be surprised like how many people are approachable and willing to help. As a PhD student in 2014, for example, this was my experience. It was just under 1 year into when I started my PhD. I went to the IOC World Conference. In there, I met Professor Roal Ba, who is the scientific committee chair of the scientific committee. Just so happened that I sat next to him. And I just start talking to him, and now I'm actually the social media coordinator for that conference. That is the biggest conference in sports injury prevention. It just because I had that conversation, I was able to network, but also see an opportunity and to see that there is a gap within that conference, because they didn't have a social media program. And I've asked, what's your social media strategy? Do you have a social media plan? I'm more than willing to help. Yes, I was based in Australia, but still I can contribute to the conference. So just put your hand up, trying to think outside of the box. And I think that can really, be beneficial for both parties. And also when you network, don't only try to network up. Don't only look at those professors up there. Try to network all directions, professors, postdocs, but also people at your own level. And for me, it's also very important to network with those PhD students and master's students, because they're not, they also provide you opportunities to collaborate. They're also up and comers. So you do network across the board with people at different levels, and continue to get to know more people, get to know about their research, and really work on those personal relationships. As Alan mentioned, we are all human. So, and end of the day, it is those relationships that matters, but also identifying your heroes, it really matters, and finding your tribes, having been in an environment that really support you, nurtures you, because research is very competitive. We are could be applying for the same grants at the same time, but it's really important that we support each other as well, and help and nurture the work, having somebody to discuss the type of work that you do and support through that. But I think the most important thing that I can say is don't be afraid to fail. So dare to fail, because otherwise you don't know that you can succeed. If you don't try something, you don't know if that is something for you or if it's not. And step outside of your comfort zone. There's a thing called forward failing. So every time, you try to apply for a grant, a job, or a project, if it doesn't work, that's all right. Learn from that experience, grow from that, and then move forward. And develop a Teflon mind, because you are not your failure, but build on that skills. Don't let that define who you are or what you can do. And also have those long-term goals. So everything that you do, you build up your experience and work towards that long-term goals. And it's also very important to have mentors that you can actually talk openly and be vulnerable with, so that you feel comfortable saying, I don't feel confident in that, I need to develop these skills. What's your guidance? Because you don't always have to be that perfect person that can do everything right. Research, working in academia, it's always learning experience. I think Alan probably will agree with me as well, that he still learns after all these years of decades and decades of working in research. So always be willing to learn, open to learn, and have those mentors that been through that process, that can help you see the path when you can't see it. But also important to have, I think, mentors that are like close to you in academic or research age, the ones that actually travel through that path just before you. Because I know Alan's great, like his office is upstairs from mine, you can always talk to him, but then and provide guidelines. But it's also good to know somebody that's 1 or 2 years ahead of you, that can be in through the path very recently, and perhaps they can give you some tricks and tips that they've done, or they can share with either. I think the last thing is, as I mentioned, I'm a quite interested in knowledge translation, and I use social media quite a lot, and I think that's a very good tool that you can use to network with people, but also to find out about the latest research and what's going on, find your niche. So, you know, don't be afraid to be active in social media. You don't always have to post, or you don't always have to talk to people. But I even got Garrett to after a month to sign up on Twitter, and you can see that he's active. You know, it's a learning process, and another way to get yourself out there as well. I think I'll leave there, Garrett, and if there's any questions,
Yep.
I'm just conscious of the time.
So we're going to open the floor to questions. I'll start it just to kind of get the icebreaker. This is for Professor Silman. So this is more of once you're in the PhD. So grants and postdocs are very competitive. And as a young PhD student, how do you recommend to identify the right grant once you like feel like you're transitioning out of PhD, and then make the best case of getting that grant, even if it's from a small grant working?
Okay. Well, I'll be relatively brief. I think there are a number of grant bodies who give relatively short-term grants to people as they are completing their PhD to, if you like, work up the more definitive grant. Because I think what's really difficult is when you're finishing your PhD, then to go on to a postdoc, because you haven't got the time. So look out for those organizations that will fund this kind of bridging grant, or giving you time to write up your PhD so you can get the papers as well as the PhD finished, and also allow you to develop an application. Obviously the second thing is for those people who have a professional qualification, like a sports scientist, physiotherapist, etc. It may be that actually, and I know it's not ideal, but you know, you can work clinically part-time and give yourself the chance, because the truth is, to be successful in a postdoc, your first postdoc application is really difficult, and it's very competitive. So you need to think of something like a 9-month time frame to put together a high quality application. Sounds bad, but that's the truth. There are also the possibility that you can get a postdoc not when you're applying for your own grant, because for many research active individuals, they apply for funding for a project grant, and they need a postdoc often to undertake the work. And certainly when I was the head of the arthritis charity in the UK, a very high proportion of the applications we got were included within the costing was, we want the funding for a postdoc. So that's not the same as getting your own competitive funding, which is clearly more prestigious, but it is an alternative route to get into funding.
Yes, thank you. That was a great answer. I also have a question for Nim. So a little bit more on the social media side, which you referenced my new Twitter account. From a professional social media account, how do you best leverage this to help gain visibility and impact for your young career, and also for your publications and for prospective applications in the future?
Sorry, Garrett, I didn't hear the last part.
So how do you use it from a professional social media account? How do you best leverage it to gain visibility and impact for yourself, your brand, and your research?
Yeah. So for example, if you have published papers, you can use Twitter to share those the work that you published. Average lifespan of a tweet is about 18 minutes, so don't be afraid to retweet. And also, you know, you can write a little blog, you can have your own blog, you can make animations or infographics, and you can share them. In that way you can disseminate the work that you've done, but also you can connect with other researchers. You can figure out who are the key researchers in the field that I'm interested in. If they're on, for example, let's say if they're on Twitter, you can follow them, look at the conversations that they're having. if you feel confident and comfortable, you can contribute to them. But also, you don't have to if you don't feel confident enough. You can always like or retweet, and by doing so, you can, make yourself known to them. Because if somebody start liking or retweeting your tweets or commenting, me as a researcher, I will always notice them after a while. It depends how many followers you have, but also you can use hashtags to follow the topics that you're interested in. You can communicate with your fellow researchers, given if your Twitter account is open, so it's not a private one. Pretty much everybody can see these interactions, and you can kind of slowly build your brand. It depends on what you feel comfortable on doing or not. Also, you can like I did, put your hand up and offer to manage institutional Twitter account or set something up. When you're at conferences, you can live tweet. That's something that I do quite often. Use the conference hashtag and live tweet. So live tweet is you go to a talk, you listen to whatever the talk that you listen to, and you just summarize those key points and tweet them. So when you do this, you kind of starting to build your brand, build your reputation. But it's as I mentioned, it's important to do what you feel comfortable with. Some people are, very social. They're very comfortable face to face, but they're not really all that comfortable on social media. Whereas some people are very open and loud and chatty on social media, but quite different when you meet them in real life. You can also network or connect if you're going to a conference. This is what I used to do. I still do that. Look at the presenters list, see if they are on Twitter. You can tweet out to them, say, I am looking forward to your session. Can we meet up? Or so you can actually organize those meetings as well on Twitter, or just tweet to them when you meet them. You can it just give you another avenue. And there's no hard and fast rules. You just have to do what feels natural and comfortable to you.
Great answer. And to sum up what Professor Silman responded to Raul asked, can you comment on an ideal time frame that one should invest in a postdoc? And then Professor Silman said at least 3 years, ideally 5, because in your postdoc you want to establish yourself on the path of independent career and hence achieve your own grant success. Great question. That was a question I had, and great answer as well. I think we'll, if no one else has any other questions, we'll kick it back over to Kirsten to finish out the talk.
Thank you. And I know that we are just a little bit past our 30-minute time, but I appreciate everybody staying. I think this was a really helpful conversation for those of you early career researchers and all of your questions. And I wanted to share a link from the Osteoarthritis Action Alliance that I think has two purposes that I'm going to share. One is shamelessly because we're launching this toolkit today, so I wanted to plug it and it has relevance for this conversation. But I think more importantly for your interest as early career researchers, the Osteoarthritis Action Alliance is a public health organization. We're a coalition that tries to take the evidence-based science that all of you researchers find in your daily searching and research endeavors and bring those to bear in the public arena in a way that's useful for people to use that information when it's relevant. So one thing that we have done with some of your colleagues that are members of the Osteoarthritis Research Society International and other folks who participate on our task group that is focused on injury prevention, we have been focusing on youth athletes and have put together a toolkit based on the findings that researchers have learned over the years of the impact of sports injury on post-traumatic OA and biomechanics, the importance of proper movement in training for sports to minimize those non-contact injuries that can lead to increased risk of OA. So I just wanted to make you guys aware of this toolkit that is designed for coaches, athletes, parents, called remaininthegame.org. And we'll put that link up here right now. You can access it. Check it out. We are launching it today. Share it as it is relevant for your audiences, athletic trainers, other fitness professionals who work with athletes. But just understand that this is the kind of broad outcome that your research endeavors can lead to, depending on, the relevance, whether it's in clinical practice or a public health endeavor like this. So it really is important, all that you are doing behind the scenes. I don't know that they're really behind the scenes, but we rely on your research to make these kinds of comments and put together this kind of educational information that can help people on a broader scale. So just keep that in mind. The last thing, just a quick plug, we will post a poll for this webinar. Would love for you to just give your comments on what you thought, just a couple of quick questions. And with that, that's all I have to say, just to thank all of our presenters today and all of you for attending.
Thank you very much for having us, and thank Professor Silman and Dr. Perera for contributing to this.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you again. All right, I think that's it.